mistake. I actually hit the mute button. I'm good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
I didn't get out enough. It was a beautiful day, and I did not have the opportunity to get out all the stuff we should did.
I know. Don't you wish we could just do these meetings at a park or something? That'd be nice.
Control the narrative.
You know, I think we should have as a putting it out there for task force members. You can say next time we want to do this at a park. I'm going to do this at a park where we all can hang out. We can do this picnic style. Still enforce the formality, but with some sunlight. With some sunlight. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, we got folks joining. Come on in. This is the best part because in a traditional meeting setting, this is when we would have water fountain talk and folks would be getting caught up at the elevator outside as you're walking in, shuffling, carrying all your papers and stuff. All right. All righty.
Get started in about 1 minute.
Thanks, Jamal.
Awesome.
Nice dragon, Emil.
That's right. I think that's Charizard. Bringing up my Pokemon days.
Yes, this is my son's computer, so that's his Charizard.
Oh, I was right. Look at that. That's great. I know we only have a few. We have a few folks. We're going to give folks a few more minutes to join.
I think we can kick it off while we have a good mass of task force members and folks who are presenting today to us. But before we start this meeting, between last week's meeting and today, there's been a lot of tragic events happening in our country. And I want to toss it over to Mayor Stewart to talk through some of those things, but also to orient us as a task force before we kick off today's meeting. Mayor Stewart.
Great. Thanks, Jamal. I really appreciate it. And as Jamal said, we wanted to take a moment tonight before we started our meeting because since the last time we met, the lives of 8 people, 6 women of Asian descent, were violently taken from their community, their family, their friends. And we know because of white supremacy and racism in our country, hate crimes have been on the rise against the AAPI community, and this is unacceptable. We need to do all the work we can together and in solidarity with the AAPI community to address these issues and move forward. We also witnessed yesterday the killing of 10 people in a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. And we know the work to stop gun violence in our country continues. And we stand in support and in mourning with those in Boulder. And I just want to say thank you again for all of you who are here this evening and who have taken on this task to be a member of this task force. We know we're actually asking a great deal of all of you, and this is really important work. And as we've talked about, our goal is to work to create and create sustainable, safe communities. And this work is important, not just for us that we do here together, but our work here does go beyond just our 2.4 square miles as a city. And so I do ask, as we do our work tonight and throughout the meetings of the task force, that we carry with us those who've been taken from us, and we commit to creating a safer, healthier future for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. So before we jump it off and get into the meat of this meeting, let's do a quick round robin for those who are not in attendance for our first meeting, and for the record, and please share your first name, your ward, and your community involvement in the city of Takoma Park. So I'll go in order of my screen, or I'll introduce myself first. Jamal Holtz, lead facilitator for Link Strategic Partners. I'll kick it off to my colleague, Jevin Hodge. Introduce him.
Thank you, Jamal. I'm Jevin Hodge here with Link Strategic Partners. I'll be one of your co-lead facilitators. I'm gonna pass it over to Cordell Carter.
Cordell Carter on mute. Cordell Carter from Expectant Advisory, also a facilitator, so happy to see you all on this evening.
Go to Molly Mitzner.
Hi, everyone. Molly Mitzner with Link Strategic Partners, Director of Community Engagement. If you have any tech or support needs, let me know. Flag it in the chat. I'll be able to help you out.
Michael Aiken.
And I'm Michael Aiken, and we're supported by a team of people off screen taking notes to make sure everything that's said is captured and acted on. I'm president of Link Strategic Partners, and we'll be monitoring the chat box tonight. So thank you for your time.
City Manager Ludlow.
Got me off guard. I'm Suzanne Ludlow. I'm the city manager. I'm here with a number of the team members that I have that will be going through a program this evening.
Hand it over to Chief Duvall.
Thank you. I'm Tony Duvall. I'm the chief of police here in the city of Takoma Park. I also grew up in the city of Takoma Park. It's my hometown.
I'm going to also say for the record, there's no favoritism here on how I'm calling names. I'm just going in order of my screen. Mayor Stewart.
Sorry, I was on mute. I couldn't find my mute. Hi, everyone. Kate Stewart, Mayor in Takoma Park.
Grace Wiggins.
Hi, I'm Grace Wiggins. I'm the housing manager for the city.
Dwayne.
Hi, good evening. Dwayne Scott, Ward 6, dad, soccer player, soccer coach, civil rights attorney.
Sadie.
Hi, I'm Sadie. I'm from Ward 3 and no official titles, just done some alternative to armed policing work in Chapel Hill and at the University of North Carolina.
That's official, Sadie. Gregory.
Good evening. I'm Greg Clark. I'm the Director of Recreation for the city.
Councilwoman Searcy.
Councilwoman Talisha Searcy for Ward 6.
Adam.
Hi, everyone. Adam Braskich. I'm a resident of Ward 6, and I think this is, I'm a relatively new resident of the city, so this is my first official affiliation, and I'm happy to be here.
Deputy City Manager Clark.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jessica. I'm the Deputy City Manager here with Takoma Park, and we have a lot of our city staff on the call this evening. Excited to have them present to you, and I'll be helping make sure that you all get all the information you need from our staff.
Samira.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Samira Cook Gaines, and I'm the Economic Development Manager for the city.
Michael Rubin.
I'm Michael Rubin from Ward 2 and work with Impact Silver Spring Justice Coalition on the board of Crossroads Community Food Network.
Emil.
Hey, everybody. Ajmal Qureshi, Ward 3. By day, lawyer at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and I'm on the ACLU Maryland board as well.
Emil Parker.
Yes,
Hi, I'm a resident of Ward 5, and I volunteer with Tacoma Park Mobilization and Silver Spring Justice Coalition, focusing on policing reform issues.
Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Darielle? Brad? Wait.
It's Daryl Braithwaite. Hi, all. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Tacoma Park and also a Tacoma Park resident for many, many years.
Kiminori?
Hi, Kiminori Nakamura, Ward 6, assistant researcher, Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice, University of Maryland.
Thank you, Christina.
Sorry, Christina Murado, Ward 4, Tacoma Park resident for the last, I think, 7 years. And I'm an educator in DCPS.
Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Van Tol. I live in Ward 1. I am on the Piney Branch Elementary School PTA Executive Board. I represent the school for the NAACP Parents Council, and I am happy to be here.
Sawa?
Hi, I'm a resident of Ward 5. I serve on the Friends of the Tacoma Park Library and the Police Advisory Board, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Olajide.
I live in Ward 6. I'm also on the Police Advisory Board, and I've been in Takoma Park for about 10 years now.
Awesome. I think we got everybody. Thumbs up. I got thumbs up from my nephew's first grade teacher. So I'm gonna use it sometimes here. So just to recap from last meeting and reorient individuals to the purpose of the task force. Last meeting, we covered a lot of ground to help us set the charge for what this task force should focus on over the next few months. It was a lot, and we know it could have been a bit overwhelming. We are here, Link Team, we're here to be your navigators throughout this process. And to recap a little bit from last meeting, we heard from Councilmember Searcy about the city's commitment to a community-driven process led by community members. So you all, this is your task force. You lead this work. We're here to support you in that. And we did a high-level review of what was in the research and data folder. We'll continue to share and unpack necessary reports, data sets, or research you'll like to unpack and see in that folder. So please share those things that you would like to see in that folder with either myself or someone from our facilitation team. In addition, we unpack some initial community feedback from stakeholder audits across the community. We encourage members of the task force to take a look at last week's slide deck to get an overview of those themes we heard from stakeholder meetings. Our team will also gather some quick summary reports for you all to review that, so you can have a high-level executive overview of what we heard in those meetings from community. And then we ask you all what the success looks like to you. And we heard similar things from what we heard during some of the stakeholder audit meetings and those interviews, some of those things. And to add to that conversation, some of those things we heard was focused on marginalized communities when discussing policy reform, ensure that racial justice and economic justice is a key priority in these conversations, continuously engage and educate the community along the process, re-looking at some of those policies and systems across government. Then we talked about discussing the role of policing in Takoma Park, but looking at city services as a whole. And that ranges from like mental health services, disability services, homelessness, public safety, public services and public works, and much more. And we'll get to unpack some of those things in today's meeting. And then the meeting ended with remarks from City Manager Ludlow and Mayor Stewart, of course, sharing their commitment to this process and willing to answer any questions and provide any data when needed. So again, this is a community-driven process. So any way we can be of assistance to you all in your work as we're kicking off this task force, please don't hesitate to reach out to the facilitation team. So I'll kick it over to my colleague Cordell. As always, we want to lay out these conversations and discussions with the rules of the road. So Cordell, I'll take it over from here.
Great. Thank you, Jamal. And hello again, everyone. Based on our last discussion, we went back and made some edits to the rules of the roll, mostly additions, no subtractions. So, we said enter with curiosity, when things get difficult, it's okay to wonder. What we've added that it is also okay to ask clarifying questions, okay? So just be mindful of that. We've added also that for trying to get notice on the Zoom applications is not as intuitive to everyone. We know we have varying levels. So you can use the raise hand function, but because we also have people monitoring the chat, you can also send direct messages. You can put it in the chat. You can wave if all else fails. We will notice you. We'll make sure you're heard. You can also use the chat space for gathering your thoughts. Perhaps you haven't fully thought through something. There's a reaction to the data that you have. For instance, you can use a chat function to kind of think out loud with that. That's perfectly acceptable. Listen to understand, not to respond. There's a lot of information coming at you this evening from your city leaders. And so there's going to be a lot to digest. And so listen first, and then we can respond. This be better. Stay mentally and physically present. Best practices for Zoom are 45-minute chunks. Do a lot of Zoom. And so I know we're asking a little more of you than best practices at the end of your workday. So again, I just thank you all and commend your public service and the spirit with which you go about this work, because I know this is not easy to do. Make this a brave space. We're going to fearlessly share ideas. We're going to ask questions. Speak in rough draft. We're on a learning journey together, all of us. Respect each other's thinking. Value everyone's contribution, and please assume positive intent. That's important. And lastly, I'll say, let's use I statements to depersonalize things. So we're not talking about people. It's like, I think, based on what you just said, I think, that's a much better way than like, I don't like what you said. Okay. So that's just a way of depersonalizing it. And we found that to be a leading practice. Now, we're going to do a lot less talking as facilitators in this meeting and give you all as task force members an opportunity to learn about city government and city services at a level that most of your fellow residents would never go. So this is quite a privilege. You're going to do a deep dive. For some of you, it would be new information. For others, you may know some of what's being presented. Now, to be clear, as we move forward, this task force is not to be filled with officials from the city of Takoma Park speaking at you. This is your task force, right? Our goal here is to ensure that everyone has a baseline of information and to get a sense from the various agency heads on how they see their role in the overall public safety regime of the city and to help inform our discussions. So we're going to open up with a presentation from City Manager Letlow to give you an overview of how the city of Takoma Park is organized. We'll then hear from 4 agency heads from housing and community development, recreation, public works, and the police department. After each presentation, we'll have a moderated Q&A for each agency representative, and we'll get to have a recap, next steps, discussion after all of the presentations. This will not be the last time you'll hear from the agency representatives. We can allocate time in future meetings to unpack more of these information you're hearing. And you can also ask to have a representative come back. We will oblige, we'll do our part. As you all are listening tonight, think about what additional information you may want from these or other guest speakers, and we can invite them in. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to your city manager, Ms. Letlow, for an overview of Takoma Park.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So we've got a screen share here. The goal for this evening was to give a high-level overview, and as Cordell mentioned, if we need to come back, we're happy to do so. If you need information offline, we're happy to provide that. So next slide. So tonight, I'm going to do a quick overview kind of the overall city structure. We'll hear from Grace Wiggins and Samira Cook-Gaines of Housing and Community Development. We'll hear from Gregory Clark in Recreation, Daryl Braithwaite in Public Works, and Chief Duvall from the Police Department. Next. So some of you don't know that there's differing ways of having a small city government, and one common way is the council manager form of government. In this form of government, the policymaking and legislative authority are vested in the 7-member council, which comprises of an at-large mayor and 6 ward representatives. The mayor sets the council agenda and provides over the meetings, but is otherwise equal to the other 6 council members. So it's a little different than a strong mayor form of government. The council sets the city policy by passing ordinances and resolutions, adopts the city budget, appoints members to committees, and hires the city manager and the city attorney. So they hired me. The city manager oversees the day-to-day management of the city. I implement the policies of the city council. I prepare a draft budget annually for council consideration, which is underway at the moment. So the people that you'll see on the screen have all been looking at numbers for days. So I prepare a draft budget for the council consideration, and then I take a direction on the work from a majority of council members. So it's 4 of 7 council members set the policy for the city, and I implement that policy. And obviously I implement the policy within the parameters of laws and ethics. Our city government is divided into a number of departments. We have the general government offices, which include city manager and finance and human resources and city clerk. We have police, we have public works, recreation, housing and community development, a small communications office with oversight of our city TV, our media communication specialist, and a newsletter. And we have our library, which is an independent library. The city employs over 200 staff. It's about 172 full-time equivalents because we have many part-time staff that work for recreation and some other units. But it really is a lot of people that work for the city to serve our 18,000 residents in a very small geography of 2.4 square miles. We have a very small city budget of about $31 million annually to do all of the services that we provide. Next slide. So I just want to let you know that there's some resources for when you want to know about the city. And a good one is the annual budget. But actually a better one is the comprehensive annual financial report. It sounds boring. It's called the CAFR. It's on our city's website on the finance department documents section. The budget documents show the planning tools looking forward, what the city council wants to see implemented with the funds that we have available. But the CAFR shows what we did. And it provides a lot of actual detail and reports and 10-year reviews. So if you're trying to do comparison information for reports, it is better to look at the CAFR than the budget. We have many people that go and try to say, you were spending all this money, and then we actually didn't spend that much. So it's better to look at the hard data. Another place for information is obviously the census or the American Community Survey. The census, we're waiting for the new census information from 2020. The American Community Survey is a survey that's done on a very random basis annually, but they're very different sources, even though they're both pretty much run by the Census Bureau. The census information is restricted to just a few demographic questions. The American Community Survey gathers information on more topics, but it's not as reliable for a small community. As we're going through this process, you'll have a lot of data from the police department and from some other departments, but recognize that we don't have the kind of statistics at hand that a larger community does. And so it is one of those things that is a constant challenge for us as staff members, and it will be for you if you're trying to do some comparisons. Next. So one of the things that I'm proudest about the city of Takoma Park as an employee is that our council has set really strong priorities and policies for us to follow. They have council priorities that they adopt each year, and those are on our website. If you haven't access to this PowerPoint at some point, these are links to the council priorities. They have a race equity goal that's very strong. There's a housing and economic development strategic plan that was adopted in 2019, and just slightly more recently, the climate emergency response. And one of the things that's kind of leading the whole effort of this task force is a resolution from 2017, setting the goals and priorities for the police department. I am very proud that my staff looks at these documents frequently, uses them to propose items for the budget, references them as we prepare agenda items for council consideration. And the council calls us on it all the time. So we just want to make sure that we are living up to the policies that the council has set. Next. As we talk about what are the roles of public safety throughout the city government, one of the things that I think is important to remember is that the whole purpose of city government is public safety. The whole purpose of city government is mentioned in the charter of the city, which is that the council shall have the power to pass all ordinances for the protection and preservation of city property rights and privileges, for the preservation of peace and good order, for securing persons and property from violence, danger, or destruction, and for the protection and promotion of the health, safety, comfort, convenience, welfare, and happiness of the residents of and visitors in the city. We take this very seriously throughout the whole city government, and obviously the council has taken it seriously by having this public safety task force established. There's a tendency to just think the police are the ones who deal with public safety, and it is larger than that. And as we go through and talk with, and you'll hear from several of our departments, you'll see how we each play some different roles in protecting the community. One other thing just to mention here, as I said, I'm hired by the city council to run the day-to-day operations of the city. So I oversee the police department. So as we go through this, the police chief reports to me. And as you're looking through different recommendations and that kind of thing, that is something to remember, that there may be a role for me in carrying out your recommendations that's at a higher level than the police department. So that's my overview for the really big picture. And I don't know that there's something to ask me specifically. I'm happy to do that, but we certainly have our other folks in some of our different departments to do a very quick overview of their role in public safety for the city.
Thank you, City Manager Ludlow. Any questions? If you have a question, please use the raise hand feature or show your hand in the screen.
So city structure is lots of fun, but it may just come up at a later time, and I'm happy to answer questions at that later time.
Any questions before we move on? Awesome. But thank you, City Manager Ludlow. If you all have any questions later or at some point, you have my contact, Susie's contact. Feel free to reach out. I'll now hand it over to Grace Wiggins and Samir Cook Gaines to give an overview of housing and community development. So I'll hand it over to my colleague to share screen here.
And Grace or Samira, whichever one wants to go first, jump right in.
Well, if I had unmuted myself, you would have heard a great intro. So here I go again. So good evening, and thank you all so much for being part of such an important committee. I think this is really exciting, and I'm excited to meet all of you. I was curious to see who I would know from my time here in the city, and luckily I only know one or two people, so this is a really good cross-section of ward representation and folks that are doing some really great work. My name is Grace Wiggins. I'm the housing manager. I'm joined by Samira Cook Gaines, and we're going to do a short presentation on housing and community development, one of the departments that's part of the city, the city structure. I'm going to start, and then Samira is going to jump in. Please feel free, if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat box, and we can probably answer them while we each take a break. But I want to start off by at least giving you a overview of what we call HCD. Hold on. Sorry. Which is Housing and Community Development. The structure of the department from an organizational standpoint operates with a director, and right now that position is vacant. And then there are 3 divisions under Housing and Community Development. It's Housing, my division, Economic Development, which is led by Samira Cook-Gaines, and then Planning and Community Development, which is run by Rosalind Grigsby. And there are goals that have been established for the department. I'm not going to read them all because I think a lot of what the city manager shared with you, the values that make up the city of Takoma Park are incorporated into the goals of each of the departments. But quite generally, and you will see this on your screen, you know, working and preserving, enhancing our existing commercial and residential building inventory, revitalizing commercial and residential neighborhoods, ensuring decent and safe, I call it habitable, rental housing in our city. And, you know, a lot of that in a small city happens because it is a community. It's a small city, but it is a diverse and rich community. And a lot of the goals that we attempt to achieve through these overarching kind of idealistic goals are happening in each one of your wards. And hopefully the things that you learn during this process you'll be able to take back to your small part of the community and incorporate those into your leadership roles as you serve on this committee. On the slide also, we've talked a little bit about examples of some of the work that we do, and I'll just do a brief overview of those. So we love to encourage folks to become homeowners, and because of that, we have a number of programs based off the leadership of our city council that support that. First is a first-time homebuyer program. We do assistance both with education and certification so that folks who are first-time homebuyers can qualify for down payment assistance programs. Included in that is the city's down payment assistance program, where we provide $10,000 in the form of a loan to a household that wants to become a first-time homebuyer. We also have rental assistance programs for folks who are struggling around rent, but it's bigger than that. Everything that we do is always going to be bigger than kind of the title. So that's anything from rental assistance, prescription assistance, utility assistance, and some other soft referrals that we're able to help with. Samira Cook-Gaines is our very first economic development manager, and it's brought a depth to the work that we do in HCD. So an example of that is a technical grant for small businesses that was formed under her leadership. And together, Samira and I have worked on a lot of workforce development related programs because we know that many folks in our city are either underemployed or unemployed on the lower end of the wealth scale. And we want to try to make folks competitive for the workforce. The next slide is a little bit about the data. It's very interesting that folks just aren't familiar enough with the structure of the city, both from a home ownership side as well as a rental, affordable rental city. So the city of Takoma Park was created and has been established as an affordable housing rental market. There's no such thing as market rate housing in the city of Takoma Park unless it's a single family home that's being rented. Everything else falls within rent stabilization, which is similar to rent control, but it creates ongoing and perpetual stability in rental housing. And the city of Takoma Park and my division specifically oversee the administration of the rent stabilization program. And here's some numbers to put it all into context. 585 rental just buildings, and of those buildings combined, it's a little over 3,200 rental units. And in terms of the businesses in our city, there are slightly over 550 businesses that make up our city's landscape. Some of the interesting things that we've learned during the past year is how many people we've been able to help during this worldwide health emergency, COVID-19. And here's a little bit more about who we've been able to help through funding that was dedicated by the council almost a year ago, because we knew that the potential impact of this health emergency would have a devastating impact, mostly on our renters and also on our small businesses. So direct financial assistance was provided to 92 of those businesses. And I must say that our city was quick in acting and getting those dollars out to small businesses, even before the county. Outreach to over 500 businesses and 56 grants for safer operations. And that is anything from personal protective equipment to how folks were going to operate in light of closures and phasing, and also testing. 1,100 public health signs, and many of you may have seen them throughout the city. And they went out to businesses, and you know them as face mask required, stand 6 feet away. That just doesn't happen naturally. It was a coordinated effort through our economic development division. And then finally, 9 cleaning stations that were installed inside of businesses to address the shortage of cleaning supplies. And you'll remember a year ago, it was just almost impossible to get anything from hand sanitizer to handy wipes and all the other things that businesses needed. And so we were glad to come in and help businesses kind of adjust and pivot into a new reality. So with that, is this me, Samira?
No, this is me.
Great. I now turn it over to Samira Cook-Gaines.
Thank you so much, Grace. And I'll say in the beginning, Grace mentioned that there's a vacancy in the director position for housing and community development. Both she and I and Rosalind Grigsby, our planning and community development manager, all report directly to the city manager. And I have to say, there has been a vacancy in that position, but it has really forced or opened an opportunity, because it doesn't feel like a force, of Grace and I working really hand in hand, specifically around the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan. And some of the strategic initiatives that we are prioritizing really fall between both our divisions. The first is increasing opportunity for affordable home ownership through local nonprofit development partners. So Grace mentioned that 2 or more units being rented by a single owner fall directly under rent stabilization or some rent stabilization scheme. That has really driven a very interesting economic divide in our city between renters and homeowners. As you know, renters don't have the benefit of equity or their homes appraising at astronomical amounts as they are in Takoma Park. And for Grace and I, the conversation turned to home ownership, which is a way to create community wealth for residents. So the focus on home ownership for me has been about affordable home ownership, not affordable housing, which often just falls into the category of rental housing. So we are working on our 3rd affordable home ownership opportunity in the city. And thanks to the mayor leading this, the city manager supporting this, we're actually able to talk about creating wealth through home ownership in Takoma Park and helping folks get in who are in that missing middle position. They can do they can do more than rent, but you certainly can't buy in Takoma Park when our housing prices start around the high 600s. So we are working really hard in that space, and I'm really excited about the 3 units that are becoming online in the next year and a half. The other piece is enhancing the facades for the local businesses in the Crossroads commercial districts and a few other kind of targeted locations in the city. We won a grant about a year ago from the state of Maryland to do some facade improvements. We are currently working with the property owners and the business owners to upgrade Tacoma Langley shopping center, as well as the businesses along Holton Lane. And there will be a few businesses in Old Town who will also benefit from these funds. We expect to start seeing activity around this in the summertime, June, July. And then everybody's baby, but really Talisha's baby, redevelopment of the Takoma Park Recreation Center, which is located on New Hampshire Avenue in Ward 6. We are currently wrapping up the first step, step 0 of a million steps in this process, but it's community engagement. So that's been a really strong priority over the last year. The pivot around COVID has been really just phenomenal for our consultant and for our staff. And what we're doing is wrapping up the final piece, which is a community survey. So if you guys haven't gotten your surveys in, you have until the 31st. You can find them online, and they should have come in your monthly newsletter. And then providing additional emergency assistance grants to resident renters. So the courts are open and folks have not had the means, the resources, the opportunity to pay simple bills, let alone their rent. And these, many of our renters in the city will be facing eviction. So we have emergency assistance funds, as Grace mentioned, and we really expect that to really be a strategic focus over the next year. And then just really working hard to establish new workforce development partnerships. Workforce development partnerships, the concept is pretty new. It's within my division, but I work really closely with Grace on this. And we really are looking for partners who are going to not just support the unemployed, but we have a number of highly educated folks who are underemployed, whether it is because their degrees or their advanced degrees are from different countries, or from their kind of familial situation where they have to take some level of job that has more flexibility. Next slide. So ways that we help with public safety. I am gonna pretty much hit all of the bullets you see here, but for us, it's about the environment, the community, the space around you. That's what community development is really, housing and community development is really focused on. So one of our goals is ensuring safe, decent, and affordable home ownership and rental housing opportunities. We want you to feel safe, in your own special place in this world. And that should be without a doubt, and it should be everyone in Takoma Park. You should be safe in your home, safe in your bed, safe on your front porch and in your neighborhood. So we also support enhancements for commercial properties and local businesses to provide safe places to shop. So as part of our facade program, for example, we'll be looking at things like lighting, things to enliven the area. There's nothing worse than, walking into a dark parking lot, or, areas where, the trees are shrouding the entrance of a business. We also, Grace and I do a lot of resident engagement. So we engage residents who are in need of employment assistance. Normally, the way this looks is folks will come to Grace because they're having housing issues. But housing issues always come from financial instability. So our work around employment support really comes through housing. And we really work to help people improve their financial stability. So there is no impetus or need to do anything that is illegal to make ends meet in your family. We engage residents who are also in need of housing assistance to avoid critical housing loss and homelessness. We've seen a huge uptick in homelessness in our city, which again does not make people feel safe, but it's also not safe for that person who is experiencing homelessness. So we really do work with residents and folks to make sure we can provide a safety net before it gets to that point. And then this work comes often out, well, mostly out of housing, and it's around survivors of domestic abuse, which has also seen an uptick where folks who are experiencing domestic abuse have been, on lockdown with their abuser in their homes. That often comes through our housing department as well. And we really see that as a critical safety issue. And then encouraging business leadership by including local businesses in our community development conversations. So Takoma Park is made up of about 50% renters and 50% homeowners, but that's not the entire community. The community includes our small businesses, and the more that we include them in our conversations, the more they are likely to stand up as community leaders and community supporters and really support the mantle and the culture of Takoma Park. So that engagement is relatively new with my position, but we have a number of very active business owners who were just invaluable actually during the pandemic. At one point, we had a shortage of toilet paper in the senior buildings. And the restaurants that were closed said, we have stockpiles of toilet paper and no one's in our restaurants, so here. So that type of community leadership is important. And then collaborating with management companies and property owners to make sure that public health and safety are really paramount around their buildings, and also working with the business associations and small business owners around public health and safety issues within the commercial districts and the neighborhoods. So with that said, I will wrap up, and I see a few questions in the chat that Grace and I can share.
Yes, and I see Grace answered one of the questions, but I'll ask one question, then we'll get some time to open it up and then move on to the next presentation. So question from Dwayne Scott. Can you tell us more about how the city supports resident survivors of domestic abuse? Do survivors self-report? Is there outreach to shelters or referrals? Any answer to that?
Yes,
Chief,
the
you should
chief has
also feel
answered
free to
that, yeah.
jump in. Yeah, the chief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that was, I know this took a little bit of time with housing and community development because they have a lot to cover, but what wasn't really covered is how closely we work among the different departments. And our victim witness coordinator in the police department is a key partner when we have a challenging situation that we find out from another source. So that's one of those things that I think the chief will be covering that at another meeting as well.
So let me jump in and just say this, and I know the chief is going to add more to this in his presentation. So the city really does have there's no wrong door for entry. And so if you come in through one department or division, you will be either referred to or we work together, as the city manager mentioned. Over the past year, I want to say a year, Chief, it feels like a little bit longer, the city lost its long-term victim witness coordinator, Diana Dean, who had been with the city forever and was just an incredible asset to the city. And so we had the opportunity to bring on someone new. That person doesn't work in the housing division, they work with the police department. but we forged a relationship where we're able to kind of talk through the housing related and support related issues that victims and survivors are dealing with. And it's, obviously you're not hearing about these cases, and it's not about self-reporting as much as it is about helping people to get to the next step. And that's what I think we do very well here at the city among all of our departments. It's getting you to the next safe or soft referral so that you can make a referral to the Family Justice Center, to Maryland Legal Aid. And in some cases, and I'll just give a short example, working with witness coordinator, it was a survivor who, remained in an apartment, but needed to leave and escape with her baby. And the landlord was planning on holding her and that abuser responsible for all the rent that was due through the end of their term. So we were able to jump in and work with her to first get her out, and more importantly, to work something out with the landlord to clear up that bill, because the last thing she needed was to restart her life without her abuser and have this, debt, but also have a negative landlord and tenant history. And so when we look at issues, we look at them holistically. We want to see that folks who are struggling, especially around issues of domestic violence, but you're a task force that's been put together during the worst crisis in the world. And so when you start thinking about what will happen to families who are evicted or foreclosed on, or can't get health insurance, or can't, maintain other parts of their lives, I mean, it's really important to think about how the long-term effects of what's happened during COVID will impact those families. And that's something that we think about in every strategy and every approach that we take. So I'll let the chief jump in because I know he's got more detail on that.
And I see also hands up, so.
Oh, their hands, okay.
Also know we a bit over time. We've got about a bit over like 20 minutes. So I want to get to Ajmel, Lauren.
What else is new, Jamal? We're always over time.
I know. I want to get to Ajmel, Laura, and then Emil in the chat. Ajmel?
Thanks so much, y'all. And thank you, Ms. Gaines, for that excellent presentation. I want very nice things to say, but I'll save those for later because I know we are over time. I think that, as most people would believe, most folks in Tacoma Park, I think, want to do the right thing. I think we're lucky to live in a good community where we have many people who prioritize social justice, at least relatively more than other parts of the DMV. I think that we've seen a lot of changes in Tacoma Park over the last decade, at least since I've been here, with a lot of new development going on around the metro. I think it goes without saying that affordable housing certainly has a relationship to all of that new development that's been happening around the metro. So I think if you could talk a little bit about some of the requirements with regards to the percentage of units in those new buildings that has to be allocated towards affordable housing, and other things that those developers are specifically required to do to contribute to solving the affordable housing problem in Tacoma Park, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, Ajmel, I'll start by saying that is Tacoma, DC. So with that said, that neighborhood is Tacoma, DC, and all of that development is actually happening in Tacoma, DC. Our city, specifically Takoma Park, Maryland, has not had major redevelopment since the 70s, so in over 50 years. Which puts us in a very, very critical situation when it comes to housing and commercial space. What I will say is I do have a former life as a Ward 4 planner, which included that Tacoma, DC neighborhood. And normally those percentages are set early, very early in the discussion. And they will range from 35%, which is probably the lowest in DC, to 50%.
I'm going to interrupt because we're way, but we're
okay.
late,
So
but it's good
that's
information
DC.
to get back to you because
Sure.
there is data and there's also plans from the county about what would happen in the Maryland side that is being considered. And so that's good information to be on top of as we go forward.
Yes.
So all of the stuff above busboys is all Tacoma, DC?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. My apologies.
Oh, no problem.
But one of the things that's important is that Takoma Park has a very strange boundary. And so what we think of as Takoma Park doesn't necessarily be what the actual boundaries are. It's an issue with policing and it's an issue with a number of services that people don't really know where the boundaries are. So we have to work together and make it all work.
Lauren?
I'll be really quick. I have a really quick question. I want to thank everybody, Susan, Grace, and Samira for sharing all this great information. But I have a question about how information is being disseminated to the community, basically. I am a room parent for my son's school and I'm in touch with a lot of the parents there, and my son's teacher has really communicated a great need. And there was a time recently when I actually emailed the mayor about a family who was in need of, rental assistance or something. And I didn't know about the program and they didn't know about the program. And I don't know if they would have been able to read the website because it's in English and they don't necessarily speak English very well. So my concern is just kind of how this is being shared with the community and if there's a way for it to be more effective in some way.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think that's a really great question. And I think that I've only been with the city for 2.5 years, and Samira and I have pretty much been at the city for the same amount of time. That's something that we're trying to crack as well. How do we get the information to the folks that need it the most? We do a lot of social media, communication, and we do a lot of, and before I got on in this position, there wasn't a lot of on the ground work. I'm a big believer of on the ground and meeting people and talking to them and word of mouth and all of that. I don't know how you do that. Plus, when you don't need rental assistance, that's the thing that you bypass. So you read what is most interesting to you. We've had no shortage of folks reaching out for rental assistance. It's a program that's been in place for several years. It's not new. And we also work with the PTA and work very closely with the PTA at all the schools that are in our city to get the information out. I think the chief does a roundtable every quarter with all the principals. Is that right, Chief? All the principals of the school. I know I've been invited to join that meeting as well on occasion. So we try to get as much information out as possible, but when in doubt, reach out because it's a very, rich city. We have a lot of resources and help and other supports that we can provide to residents. And at times they go underutilized. So.
Thank you. And I'll just note that the challenge of communications is also a top priority of the council. It's a real effort that we're trying to do in different ways. We also are very fortunate that we have the newsletter that goes to every household in the city, which is unusual for cities. And we also have, our website is able to translate into many languages actually quite well. So we try a variety of things, but it's we've still got a lot to improve on. And I'd love to see us move on to the next. I'm sorry, Samira.
Susie, I just want to let everyone know, though, that we hired a community engagement firm around the rec center. As part of their final report, Lauren, there will be best practices, what went well, what didn't go well, their recommendations for us to actually improve our community engagement. So again, the council has been looking at this in several different ways and granted me the opportunity to hire a consultant. And as part of the rec center, which is great, we're going to learn a lot about how we talk to and engage with our residents. So hopefully that'll be helpful. And that report should be out the end of April.
Thank you.
Awesome. I want to get to one more question in the chat, and then we'll take any other questions and send them over to the to that team for answering. Are there data on growth of homelessness in Takoma Park during the pandemic?
No,
You know,
so
I'm not, do we have that, Grace?
no, so let me say this, we don't have that data. We don't have any support within any of our city services for homelessness. And so I think I may be, and the chief may be, the only two folks that are dealing with like this homeless thing, because
the small businesses are also,
right, and
because it
because
shows
they
up
end
as
up-
panhandling and
Right.
yeah.
So we don't, but we know it because we're getting many more phone calls from residents and businesses. Samira mentioned looking for options. And right now, I don't think there are a lot of really good options. The reason people end up in Takoma Park homeless, whether they're street homeless or they're hopping from, couch to couch, is because we're a friendly place. We have a non-resident who ended up in our parking lot and just was there for 6 months because she encountered problems in downtown Silver Spring with the Montgomery County Police bothering her every day. And she's living out of her car like so many other folks. So we don't have those numbers, but we're trying to make very strong referrals to some of the folks who actually do this work, who are clinicians that can help, move people towards stability. So.
All right, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot to come.
Yes, and we'll get to unpack furthermore and invite these folks back to the subcommittee conversation. So please don't feel like this is the last opportunity, because you'll get more opportunities to connect with these folks. Jide, I saw your question. We'll make sure to get that answer. We'll send that over to Grace and Samir so we can get an answer to that. I do want to get some time for an overview of recreation. Mr. Gregory Clark, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Good evening. Recreation. Purpose of the recreation department in the city, we provide all sorts of programs, leisure programs to our residents, residents of all ages, from tots to seniors. We provide before and after care programs, classes, workshops, sports leagues. We put on several large events and festivals throughout the city. We partner with several organizations within the city. The rec committee gives us guidance. Of course, we receive guidance from the council as well. But we do a lot for the city in hopes of people having fun and participating in programs, just getting them out to relax and enjoy. How do we operate? The recreation department, of course, we have a director and assistant director, and we have 8 divisions within our department. We have our administrative division. We have our rec center, which is on New Hampshire Avenue, which Samira was just talking about, which is in the redevelopment process. We have our community programs department. We have our community programs department holds our teens and our young adult programs. We have athletic fields and facilities. Of course, we have our before and after school programs, our youth outreach, and lastly, our community center. Examples of work that we do, I've mentioned a few. We have a large child care program, which is one of the largest programs that we have. It's actually second to our summer camp program. In summer camp, we have, at one time during the week, we have well over 100 kids in our summer camp programs, which are really good. We offer holiday programs, sports leagues, youth and adult classes, workshops, and we also rent space in our facilities, athletic fields, and things like that to the community members. In 2019, we registered over 6,000 participants in our programs and had just under 500 offerings for the city. Interesting to note, 77% of those that registered for our programs were City of Takoma Park residents. During COVID, we had to restructure and start offering online programs. And with those programs, we averaged approximately 25 free programs per week. And which of those 25, we also offered 25 in-person classes with a total of 95 participants during COVID. So that was really good, and we had to make that shift. Next slide. What are some strategic initiatives and priorities that we're looking forward to? As mentioned before, I think we all want to find different ways to reach out to various segments of the community. So expanding our marketing and letting people know what programs and services that we offer is huge. And not only getting the information out, but getting it out in different languages so that we can reach more participants. We have a active scholarship program. So we want to make sure that as many residents as possible be able to participate in recreation programs and services. So we want to, we have an initiative now where we are now allowing, due to COVID and the current economic situation, having residents be able to participate at 100% scholarship. So if residents are interested in participating, they just let us know, fill out a form, and they can participate in any of our programs and services. We also work with our rec committee, Friends of the Rec Center, and other community members to market and participate and re-engage in the redevelopment process of the rec center, which Samira spoke about a few moments ago, which we're very excited about. One of the things that's new coming up, a new initiative, is we're going to offer morning care at our recreation center on New Hampshire Avenue. Traditionally, our morning program was just offered here at the community center. So we're going to offer that as a service to residents up there near the recreation center. And lastly, something that's really important, that we're working on in staff is we're working on, getting to receive residents back into the community center. So we have to adopt a lot of our processes and procedures to make sure that everyone is safe, and the participants as well as staff. So those are some of the things we're looking forward to. Next slide, please. In terms of public safety, we work with a lot of, we have a lot of partners, the school board, we work with the city police, we work with different businesses, but I sort of like in what we do is mostly prevention. We provide a lot of prevention programs, and by giving young kids, tots to seniors, things to do. We try to focus on our teens, as far as prevention programs, giving them skill building opportunities, developmental opportunities to learn and grow. And in that process, staff are, getting to know the children and the families. They're making connections. We're interacting, as I said, with school officials, the police department. So our whole goal is to make sure that no kid falls through the crack. So if we know the kid, we usually communicate with the school, about a kid. If a kid is having challenges in school, then they sometimes reach out to us so that we can, make sure that we create some sort of safety net to help that particular kid or family. We also offer programs and services for people with disabilities. And our senior population, we offer a host of programs that, assist with their health and their safety as a part of our services and things that we offer. So that's a brief overview in the essence of time. That's the recreation department in a nutshell.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions from task force members? Dwayne?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your great presentation. One of the questions I had is, being on Ward 6, I'm probably one of the residents who's closest to the rec center, and I find it to be I don't know, I could be wrong about the numbers, but I find it to be maybe an underutilized gem. because I really appreciate the fact that it's over there. My kids have used it. I've used it on many, many different occasions. But one of the things that I wanted to know about, and also I was pleased to hear about to receive the survey, which I did fill out. To look towards increasing its usage and how it could better reflect the needs of the residents. But one of the things I had a question about was the walkability of that rec center, because it is across a extremely busy highway, not highway, but sometimes it seems like a highway, New Hampshire Avenue. And I was curious, and I don't know if we'll get to this at all, about the part of safety, not just talking about police, but we're talking about health and safety as well, and any traffic incidents and traffic fatalities that occur in that corridor that could prevent or deter people from saying, you know what, I want to walk over to the rec center from wherever I am, because again, I really like it. It's a great resource, but sometimes I feel like it's seems underutilized. And again, I don't want to put it out there that it is if it's not, but sometimes it seems that way. And if there's any way to increase its usage and improve the walkability of the neighborhood so that it is less busy. I heard about perhaps installing bike lanes, which would be great. But I'd like to hear more about that aspect of how to improve the safety of getting residents over to that resource.
So I'd like to respond. I think, I mean, we're hearing from a number of our staff, but there's other staff also that are working with, coordinating with the state on road design in New Hampshire Avenue, because we want to have that as a more convenient, a bridge, not a dividing road of our community. And how does that comfortable? Smirka Gaines is working on a lot of that with Roz Crispy. And then Daryl Braithwaite, who you'll hear from in a moment from Public Works. I mean, it's a state highway, so everything we have to do is with the state government. We do have an opportunity with the huge federal monies that are coming out now. So there may be an opportunity for us to move forward on that. But safety of pedestrian paths is really important in the city, and we do a lot to that. And I think Daryl will speak to that in a moment. But thank you.
Yeah, and if I can speak to the usability of the facility, we have a lot of programs and at the facility. The facility is I want to say over 40 years old, and it's in a cookie cutter mold of early recreation from the 70s. And it's sort of tough to have more than one class or workshop or something like that going on at more than one time because of the way that the room and building is configured. But our usage of the facility is actually very good. When we have classes and things that have been in the gym, throughout the week on Saturdays. And one thing we don't have a lot of is drop-in, and the programs have increased over the past 5 or 6 years. So we do have a good amount of residents that utilize the building, a good amount of teams that utilize the building. Our aftercare programs that are there, our camps that are there are usually full. So it's being utilized. Now, we can offer more, we can do more. We would like to offer a variety of programs, but the way that the building is configured, once we do get the new facility, we should be able to do a lot more.
Thank you, Gregory. I don't see any other questions from task force members, so I'll now turn it over to Daryl to give an overview of Public Works.
Yeah, hi, good evening all. I'll try to keep this brief. The Public Works Department kind of interfaces with everybody in the city in an intimate way. In some ways, we pick up the trash, we fix the potholes, we answer the phones about dead rats or problems on the street or a sign that's missing. So we have a lot of direct interaction with the public at large, some of which relates to public safety, some livability, which those two are very closely linked. The department is 35 employees. We have 8 divisions. We oversee, as I mentioned, some internal city functions like building maintenance and facility improvements, vehicle maintenance. About 85% of all the vehicle repair work that's done in the city, including to police cars, is done in-house by Public Works vehicle mechanics. And then we also have the outer facing divisions, the Streets and Parks Division, the Vegetation Maintenance Division, the Right-of-Way Division, and our Stormwater, Urban Forest departments as well. So we kind of have a pretty broad overview on a lot of the activities that impact residents around the city. I wanted to, I thought your question, Dwayne, about walkability was really key. It's been an increasing emphasis that my department, as well as the planning office, has been involved with. We have undertaken in the last 5 years more grant-related funded projects than the city's ever done before. So some of the work has been, for instance, Flower Avenue Green Street project was a $7 million project that's just wrapping up, that was done with state funds, county funds, CDBG funds, city funds, National Fish and Wildlife funds. Ethan Allen in New Hampshire, a streetscape improvement there. And a lot of that was geared towards pedestrian safety, improving the pedestrian signals, improving the crosswalks, trying to reduce the distance between sides of the street for pedestrians, and also provide safe pathways for bikes and more clarity about bikes. We've got a very exciting project that the planning department is overseeing right now through funding out of the Council of Governments for a New Hampshire Avenue bikeway. So as a person who bikes from my house to get to the Sligo Creek Trail, New Hampshire Avenue just always feels like a death trap. So there's a big project underway to design and develop a bikeway that will really make a huge improvement. Again, our part of that is really once it comes to the construction side. Right now, the planning office is overseeing all the development side. And then in addition, we do quite a bit of work on traffic calming and sidewalk, both new sidewalk as well as sidewalk improvement. And since about 2004, 2006, the city started putting some focus on sidewalks. Prior to that, the city had no dedicated funding source for new sidewalks or sidewalk repairs. It was done when streets were resurfaced and only for those areas and issues where there was a problem. So there was no coordinated way to identify missing sidewalks and to install sidewalks. Since then, we've done just a ton of work, both in ADA compliance, trying to make sure we have compliant curb ramps and crosswalks and reduced trip hazards. So the city's been methodically going through all the existing sidewalks. We've had a budget ranging from $200,000 to $500,000 a year that's dedicated towards that. And we're about 75–80% through all the existing sidewalks in terms of making them compliant. We also have a program that started to address those state highway sidewalks, which unfortunately State Highway does not oversee or maintain sidewalks along state roadways, except in very limited capacity. If they're doing a state highway project, they'll address the curb ramps. All the traffic signals in Takoma Park are overseen by State Highway and handed off to the Montgomery Department of Transportation. So we don't have any direct oversight on those, but we do work with State Highway when they have issues with non-working pedestrian signals or missing pedestrian signals. The city has a Safe Roadways Committee, which has been overseeing a lot of the safe routes to school and looking at our programs and processes. As I mentioned, the program is still fairly new, 10 years or whatever, that the city's been gearing towards pedestrian safety, traffic calming, bike safety programs in a very serious way. And so the city's original ordinances and regulations have really recently come under review. In the past, it was very much a petition-driven process. So residents in a neighborhood could petition, and if they had 2/3 of the residents in the affected area ask for improvement, it would then go through the process. The council's now been evaluating that with the Safe Roadways Committee oversight to take a look at how that might be creating barriers, either wittingly or unwittingly, and looking at ways to open up the process, provide a little more science in that, because sometimes a requested traffic calming might not really address an issue well, or there may be other areas of the community that have more serious traffic calming problems. So that issue of equity and how to get those problems addressed is one that the council is currently looking at in terms of our regulatory process. Last but not least, we do the roadway repairs and maintenance. That is somewhat a safety issue, but of course of a different kind. If you hit a pothole and your tire blows, that's not a good thing. But we also want to, keep roadways in good condition, and so the city has a dedicated funding for that. And we have been, we do an analysis of all the city roadways every 6 or 7 years. So our street resurfacing program is based on a pavement condition report. And so the council has a program where it funds about $500,000 a year when funds are available towards street resurfacing to keep those programs going. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Try to overlap in ways with that I thought you all might be interested in terms of a public safety focus. Happy to answer any questions.
And I'll just note that there's many cases where it's a joint process between Public Works, Planning, and Police in evaluating problem areas to make sure that they're safe.
Thank you, Susie. I got a question in the chat from Lauren. Philadelphia Ave in North Tacoma is a mess in terms of sidewalks, particularly between Chicago Ave and Piney Branch Road. I know this is a state highway. Are there any updates on when this sidewalk will be looked at? This is a major route to school. Thanks for all the work you do.
Yeah, we did undertake a project a couple of years ago on that section, most closely adjacent to the park between Chicago Avenue and mid-block across from the college, where there was actually no sidewalk. Strangely enough, it was kind of a hump of asphalt. So that area has been improved. The city has funded, as I mentioned, sidewalk repairs along state roadways for the past couple of years. This particular year we're currently in, our funds were on hold due to the pandemic. So we're about to start our sidewalk work again. In terms, I mentioned for the city sidewalks, we're about 75 or 80% through the sidewalk repairs. First, for those along state highways, we're really in the infancy. We've done just a couple of major projects. We've done a little bit on Carroll Avenue. We did that small section of Philadelphia Avenue that I mentioned. And this plan for this year was to continue doing the opposite side of Carroll Avenue, where we had done some work previously. And that's between Sligo Creek Parkway and Ethan Allen. And then to go to Piney Branch Road between Ray Drive and Philadelphia Avenue. So we've tried to pick those areas that either have high pedestrian counts. Obviously Piney Branch Road is across from the school, the middle school there, so that's an area of concern. The Carroll Avenue work, we had an ongoing stormwater project there, so sometimes we try to pool our projects so that we can do multiple things at once and kind of reduce the amount of inconvenience for residents and maximize our dollar for the contractor who's doing the work. So we will continue to work through that. We're I think this will be the 3rd year that we had funding towards state highway sidewalks. So we're really, as I mentioned, just at the beginning part of that. But we do maintain a list of complaints in areas where we've seen and heard problems. And so sometimes we can make some temporary repairs until we get out there and really put it back in shape that it needs to be. But otherwise, we do a full restoration with the sidewalk work as we get to it.
And you will have heard throughout that a lot of this is budget related. We're going into budget. So we've got council members on this call and just recognize it. It's infrastructure improvements are expensive.
Yes. Thank you, Daryl. I don't see any other further questions, so I want to turn it over now to give an overview of the police department. Finally, we'll close out this section tonight by hearing from the police chief. But again, we'll get, as with other topics, there's only so much we are able to cover in the time allotted. So know that this is not your only chance to ask questions. And we know from our first meeting that there's a lot of significant interest in this topic and as it relates to data and other stuff. From our experience in facilitating other public safety groups, we know that some of the folks will want raw data, others will want dashboards. So we'll find a hybrid way to present those things. But I want to turn it over to the chief, with your permission, and also invite the chief back to come back, and other agency has to come back and give a more extensive dive into some of the data as a part of some of the future meetings we're helping to frame. So I'll turn it over to you, Chief Duvall.
Thank you, Jamal. I appreciate it. Good evening, task members and community members watching. I'm Tony Duvall, the Chief of Police here in the city of Tacoma Park. I've been the chief here since January 2018. I also grew up in the city. I grew up on Maple Avenue and benefited from a lot of the programs, the recreation department, police outreach, and so on and so forth. This evening, I'm here to provide an overview of the Tacoma Park Police Department. But before I get into the overview, I really want to thank Mayor Stewart, Council Members Searcy and Siemens, and all the task force members for their time and effort in putting together and serving on this task force. I want to be very clear to you all and to the public, we support this task force. It's long overdue that we review what works and what does not work with our current public safety model. And like I said all the time, this involves taking a holistic view of public safety. It involves not only policing, but education, housing, mental health care, employment, several other factors that impact crime and quality of life in our communities. In my opinion, to have a real lasting impact on public safety and criminal activity, we must look at these core issues impacting criminal activity. We look forward to working with the task force to create a public safety model that works for all of our residents. This is really important, and I know that at the first meeting, several of the task members asked about this. We will be providing the task force with comprehensive data on arrests, citations, stops, and criminal activity for the last 5 years. This data will have a breakdown by the demographics of the individuals arrested and stopped, location of the contacts, residency of the individual stops, arrest by charge, traffic stop by charge, number of warnings versus citation issued to individuals broken down by race, gender, and much more information. It's really important that the task force have this information to understand and compare the Tacoma Park Police Department to other comparable agencies. So we're looking forward to first providing the traffic stop data. That's much easier to collect because that's a statewide database system. And then after that, we're looking forward to presenting the crime data as well as the arrest data. I'm very proud to say that our police department staff are almost a mirror image of the demographics of the city of Tacoma Park. Not many police departments can say that. Our officers come from various backgrounds and ethnic groups. Staff members speak 6 different languages with numerous fluent in Spanish. These staff members bring a guardian mentality to policing. They are people who value community and service. My motto when I first came here for hiring was quality, not quantity. I'd rather work understaffed than have staff that should not be here. A little bit about the structure of our police department. We're a full service agency, which means we handle all aspects of law enforcement in the city. That's from the traffic enforcement to investigating homicides. We currently have 43 sworn officers and 24 professional staff. We have 3 divisions, the Office of the Chief, which consists of myself, the Deputy Chief, the Executive Assistant to the Chief, and the City Emergency Management Manager. The Office of the Chief oversees management of the department, research and policy, media, emergency management, internal affairs, and the Chief's Advisory Board. The Operations Division is one of our other divisions, and it's our largest division. The Patrol Division falls under the Operations Division. This division is commanded by a captain who oversees both patrol and the community policing outreach. The patrol section has 4 patrol squads that work 12-hour shifts. We have permanent shifts on one side of the week, and we have a rotating shift on the other side of the week. It's a very weird schedule, but that's what our staff voted for. It provides the same service delivery to the city, but allows the staff to have a schedule that accommodates them. The happy staff are going to be happy employees and treat our public much better. Our other division is commanded by a captain, and it is our administrative division and support division. Several sections fall under the support division. Our criminal investigations section, where we have both uniform and plainclothes detectives. Our property and evidence section, our crime analyst, and our victim witness coordinator. That we touched on the victim witness coordinator earlier. This is an essential position. We only have one currently. She is bilingual. She speaks Spanish as well, but we would really like to get additional victim witness coordinators. I think this is a really, really important position. A lot of the things we heard from community members when I first came here was there's not enough follow-up when we're with victims of crime, not enough follow-up assisting witnesses and victims. That's one thing that Claudia does really well, but I'd really like to see that section expanded. And we can touch more on that when we get into some of the nuts and bolts of the task force. Our admin section also falls under the support division and consists of our communications section, which is our dispatchers, our neighborhood services section, our records section, and our safe speed program, which is our speed cameras and our traffic enforcement. We also have our crossing guards, our budget, and training that fall under the support division. The Tacoma Park Police Department is committed to community policing and committed to providing the highest quality police services by promoting an environment where the police department and employees in the community work in a partnership with the goal of improving the quality of life and expanding multi-ethnic community, while at the same time, and this is really important, maintaining respect for the diversity, individual rights, and dignity of all of our residents. This is integral towards developing and maintaining strong relationships. Our goal is to continue to expand these relationships, especially with those in our community who have the most mistrust of our police. An example of some of our outreach programs include Coffee with a Cop, Breakfast with Santa, our homework club that unfortunately we had to suspend due to the pandemic, our Police Explorers program, our Community Police Academy that's currently underway, our National Night Out, which is our cornerstone community outreach event. We also have a senior safety program. We also offer various service and programs that not a lot of other police departments do to enhance personal safety and safeguard property through education and awareness. And they're caring about residents every day, where we check on elderly residents and residents with conditions that they need to be checked on a regular basis. We also have our community cam program. That's the force multiplier. We also offer residential home security surveys, a ride-along program. Our police department is a safe space for online transactions. And we have multiple other outreach programs that enhance the safety of the city. And I will say, I will take pride in the employees. I think our employees are top-notch. I think the people we've hired want to be here for the right reasons. As I said earlier, they're guardians. We do not have a warrior mentality. Any of our enforcement is targeted towards problem areas. It's not random. We feel like that's the best approach. We're not going to arrest our way out of a problem. We're going to educate people. And when arrests need to be made, they will be made. Whether or not it's our hiring practices, our use of force policies, training for staff, respect for our residents, and community outreach or other activities, we are doing a lot of things, I think, right. The question is, what things can we do better or differently? Or is there a better model for public safety in general that treats our residents, especially those who traditionally have had the most mistrust of our public safety system, equally and with dignity and respect, as well as provides resources to steer people away from committing crime and becoming involved in our criminal justice system. I think this is critical. The more we can get to the root problem of what's causing crime, the better we can deal with it. Our chaplain, Gail Fisher-Stewart, is also a member of the Chiefs Advisory Board, gives a very, very good class. I would recommend that she come and speak to the task force about the history of policing and how policing was started. But one of the things she says about policing, if policing is the agent of enforcement in a racist society, as long as we have a racist society, policing is not going to improve. So that's why we must take that holistic review of not only policing, but education, housing, all of the things that are really important to making a change. And I'll end by saying, we're here to support you as you review the public safety model in Takoma Park. I and my staff have already provided you with a large amount of background information on our department. We are available to answer questions and provide information as requested. Please do not hesitate to ask. 24/7, we'll provide the information. I'll be more than happy to give the task force members my cell phone number. Plenty of residents already have it. If you have a question, if you need information, feel free to reach out to me. With that, thank you again for volunteering for the task force, and I'm open to questions from the board.
Thank you, Chief. We'll take about 1 to 2 questions. I do want to remind folks we want to have some time for discussion to recap and unpack some of what we heard today and figure out best ways to move forward, especially as forming subcommittee. So before I hand it over to Jevin to lead us through that discussion, are there any questions directly for the chief? Lauren?
I've talked a lot, so if anybody else has a question, I'm happy to
Go for it.
So I had a question kind of around what training police officers receive kind of when, around mental health issues, around social justice issues, because I know earlier there was, that issue with the signage coming down. My son and I went around putting up signs after that. And I know there was a whole kind of thing around that. And I kind of want to understand what training and education is going on behind the scenes that police are kind of being, kind of informed about the general sense of how the community's feeling and about how they can better kind of interact with community members.
That's a really good question. We provided a comprehensive overview in the packet of training that our office has been provided, but I want to touch on a few trainings that I think are really important. One that all of our officers are going to go through is called ABLE. It's the Active Bystanders for Law Enforcement, and it teaches officers to recognize officers who are not doing the right thing and interjecting and preventing that from happening. All of our staff are going to go through that. We're one of the first agencies in the country to do that. We're fortunate that one of our Chiefs Advisory Board members is also an instructor with that training. All of our officers go through annual implicit bias training. I think that's really important. All of our officers are getting training, advanced training in crisis intervention training. So all officers get that training, but what this is an enhanced week-long class where we really can understand how to disengage situations with mental health, people in mental health crisis. We're seeing so much more of it. But it's a comprehensive overview, and I'd be more than happy to come back and give a deep dive into the training. I think training is extremely important. When we had the sign issue, number one, we acknowledged what we did wrong, first and foremost. We had a community event where both I and the mayor went out and posted signs. When we, good, bad, or indifferent, the thing you're going to get from us is acknowledgement. If we do something wrong, we admit it and we try to make corrections. If we do something good, we acknowledge that. That was a learning situation for all of us. One of the things that we've developed is alternative dispute mediation, which is instead of someone just filing a complaint, they file a complaint, they give it to the supervisor, or we're going to investigate it. 6 months later, you hear back that the officer was disciplined or not disciplined. What this allows is the person that files the complaint and the officer to sit down through mediation and talk it through. And what that does is creates a resolution. So I spoke directly to the young lady that was involved in that situation. That would have been a great opportunity for alternative dispute mediation. She decided that she'd gotten the information she wanted to get out to the public, and she felt satisfied with the response. So she did not want to go through that. But we take any opportunity that we think that our staff can do things better to make our staff understand, number one, the impact that they had on individuals and vice versa. So I'm very proud of the training. I think it's, for the sake of time, if you look in the package, you'll see a comprehensive overview, but I also would be very happy to do a deep dive into our training at a later date.
Thank you.
Ajmel?
Great to meet you, Chief. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming out. I know this is adds on top of the work that you already have to do. I have a couple of sort of quick hitters, which are things that I probably should know off the top of my head already. So I appreciate your patience. Could you, I think you don't have to answer right now, but I think something long-term that I personally will be interested in. that I would like to get some data about is school resource officers in all of the schools in Takoma Park. I have an 8-year-old who attends Takoma Park Elementary School, and so I'm particularly interested in, if there is a school resource officer in that school, what the duties of that officer are. And I think eventually seeing the MOU that governs, if there is an MOU, if there are SROs, that relationship and what the role of the officer is within the school, and also data related to the officer's functions within the school. I think that's going to be a particular point of interest. I know that's a lot, so you don't have to address all of that right away. I think the second thing I'm interested in, and I assume the answer is no, but I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just learning at this point, is I assume the Tacoma Park Police Department hasn't been involved in or a recipient of either grants or materials or weapons under the federal what's called the 1033 program, which you're shaking your head, you seems like you know what it is, so I don't have to walk through it. I think that is something that I'll be particularly interested in. Again, my assumption is that Takoma Park is not a participant in that, but I could be wrong. And then I think something else, the third of my quick hitters, but the final one is I think, obviously each individual officer has First Amendment rights that, they can exercise. But I think if the department as a whole has done advocacy with regards to the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, obviously there's legislation that moved through the legislature, and I'm sure folks have different opinions as to the strength or lack thereof of that legislation. But if the department as a whole collectively has had any involvement related to that, that would be helpful to know from an advocacy perspective. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your patience with my questions.
I'll quickly answer the three. We do not have any school resource officers in any of the schools in the city of Tacoma Park. But I will say that we have a very, very close relationship with all of our schools. We meet on every other month with all the principals of every one of our schools. What that allows us to do is, number one, have those relationships. So when it is an issue, they can immediately call me. If there is an issue with a family member, we dealt with multiple things offline where parents didn't feel comfortable with coming to the police, but they felt comfortable coming to me. So we have those relationships. I'd be more than happy to get into a dialogue later on about SROs. I don't think that it's appropriate to have police in elementary schools and to some degree middle schools. I think there are some benefits at the high school level, but that the negatives may outweigh the benefits. But just to wrap, we don't have any school resource officers in any of our schools in the city of Tacoma Park. And we do not take surplus equipment from the federal government. We don't. We don't need tanks in the city of Tacoma Park. We don't need bazookas. We don't need all the stuff that other jurisdictions have acquired. And I think the last question was
LEBOR.
LEOBR.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I have openly voiced my opinion on the issues I have with the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. What my concern is that final authority to discipline officers is taken away from me. I do not want that to happen because that does not allow me to run the police department. That being said, there's a lot of conversation at the state level about changing the Maryland Public Information Act, changing the LEOBR, use of force standards, and so on and so forth. I just think that if you repeal LEOBR, you have to come up with something that works and still includes the police department. So we've been vocal about what we think does work and does not work with the LEOBR. The mayor testified down in Annapolis, and I think while it's not something this task force can necessarily change, it's something this task force can weigh in as far as an opinion on what they think, number one, at the state level. Because right now, just to give you some background, we haven't had a trial board in the city in 9 years. So, put that in perspective. As we move forward, I think the biggest thing for me with the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights is timing. How long it takes to discipline officers. And also, I think there's this common misunderstanding with the LEOBR that the chief cannot terminate officers. I have the final say to terminate an officer. Even if a trial board exonerates the officer, I still can terminate the officer. So there's a lot more discussion. I think we have a subject matter expert on LEOBR on our staff. My deputy chief is a subject matter expert. I'd be more than happy to have him come speak at one of the meetings. And I think he could really enlighten the task force on kind of some of the pros and cons of the LEOBR, the pros and cons of the Maryland Public Information.
That's helpful. Just one follow-up question very quickly, just a point of clarification. When you said we have been very vocal about LEOBR and you referred to Mayor Stewart, just some clarification about sort of who you meant when you said we. I mean, I understand the mayor has testified on behalf of the city, but has the department taken any sort of collective action in that regard?
When I said we have been vocal, I have been vocal about what I think needs to be corrected in the law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights. This is a very touchy subject because there's so many moving parts as far as what the bills are. I support reform and holding officers accountable. I support being able to release information about officers that are problem officers, disciplinary records, but there's a balance to also support the officer's privacy and the support process. So have the officers been involved in testifying? No. Has the union weighed in? No. Have I weighed in Annapolis? No, I have not, but I have, I've spoken to the Delegate 20 delegation about what I think works and what I think does not work. And I will continue to do so. But, I have an obligation to two different things. My staff, who I absolutely hold accountable, but also to the public in my service as a police chief. It's a hard balance. And I think that in the end, what we want is we want the ability to discipline officers quickly and when it needs to be done. And that process must be open so we do not create this era of secrecy. I had a lot of questions about our internal affairs report that we just put out. And unfortunately, we can only put out a certain amount of information. Now, granted, we have very few complaints, but if we were able to elaborate on some of those complaints, I think it would be very helpful to alleviate some concerns with the community and also, paint a different picture. And I think, I will be honest, I think that there are going to be massive changes to the LEOBR, the Maryland Public Information Act, and to multiple different laws at the state level that are going to drastically impact police departments. And I just don't know how that's going to, operationally, we're going to do that. I support reform, but I don't know how that looks in application.
Thanks,
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think this is a good start to a longer conversation, and I appreciate your candor.
Yes. Thank you, Chief. I want to acknowledge Dwayne's question. And Dwayne, this is also something we can work with the Chief to get an upload to the resource folder to share. But Chief, the question is, is there any information or data on school-based arrest disaggregated by race?
What you're going to get from us is a breakdown of all of the arrests that we've made in the last 5 years, and it will show location. I'm trying to think of in the last 3 years since I've been here, an arrest that has been made on school property, and I cannot think of one. But all that information will be provided to you specifically with location. So if there was an arrest at any one of our schools, you would be able to see that.
Awesome. Thank you. So
thank you.
We're going to dive into a discussion. I'll acknowledge Jamil's question about when we'll receive the data. We'll work with Chief to outline a timeline on when we can get that data. I know the Chief has been working with us over the past week in the steering committee around building out a dashboard that will have all of this data that we're discussing. So trust me, his team is working on building out that dashboard to make it easier for you all to read, rather than just putting a bunch of data in you all's resource folder for that may not be understandable. So they're building out a dashboard to kind of help with some of that.
And I want to say a little bit more on that. It's really important that the data we give you is the correct data. The traffic stop data is a little bit easier to collect because it's a state database. The arrest data is a little bit more difficult because over the last 5 years, we've had different reporting systems. So we just want to make sure that the data we're giving you is accurate, it's understandable, and it's comprehensive. And that's what, I guarantee when you get it, no question is going to be unanswered once you receive it. And we're going to be here directly if you do have any direct questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. Again, we'll get to unpack more of this conversation over our next few meetings, but I don't want to take up much time. I'll toss it over to my colleague Cordell to lead us through a quick recap discussion, again, to have a discussion on subcommittees and all of what we heard. So Cordell, take it away.
Great, thank you, Jamal. And given the lateness of the hour, I know we only have 11 minutes left. Our plan was to add more time to this particular part of the session, but looks like we won't be able to do as much as we wanted. But please, firstly, join me in thanking all of these department heads for coming in this evening. They, along with you, are going over and beyond the call of duty on this late evening. Now, we will move towards a 10-minute discussion. Let's make it a 7-minute discussion on these presentations and recap that discussion moving forward. But again, this isn't the last opportunity that you'll get to hear from these leaders. I know that you all have a lot to say to Chief Duvall. He also has a lot to offer, and I have to and I'm not blowing smoke up your backside, Chief. He's a rare bird. I'm just watching the openness of this whole process, the way they work together across the city leaders. This is a very, very rare thing. I'm not used to seeing this. It's a little disarming, to be frank. I'm like, what game are you all playing? So you all in Takoma Park are very fortunate. You have folks that are very collaborative and open. So let's talk about these presentations. What data isn't there that you would love to hear? I know Dwayne has submitted some stuff as well as Emil, but is there anything else that you would like to hear? Is there another department that you would like to hear from? Please, let's open the floor. We have 7 minutes.
Sorry, now I'm talking a lot. And I'll tamper down in a second. Are we going to get data on stops as well? And I know some of this may be unrealistic. I know we've talked about arrests, but we would get data on stops too.
You're saying traffic stops?
Yeah, that's going to be the
stops
first.
As in like Terry stops.
We don't necessarily. What we're going to break down is going to give you context. So they might not necessarily. It might necessarily define it as such, but it's easier to provide the data and then explain it to you. But yes and no. Yes, you're going to get information on the number of contacts we've had, what they were for, etc. But it might not say Terry stop. You know what I mean? So I see what you're saying. We're trying to give you as much information as possible. What you're going to see is a drastic drop off of those contacts, those street corner contacts that really serve no purpose. What you're going to see is a purposeful enforcement. So you don't see, there's not going to be randomness in how we do this. But I think it'd be better served when we talk about the data and we present the data, and there'd be a better understanding if we have the data in front of us to explain what we're saying. But yes, we are going to provide that type of information as detailed as you like. I don't know. We'd have to, once the data comes out, we'd have to take a look at it. But that's our goal, is to, because I understand what you're getting at. You know, how many times have you stopped somebody on a street corner for no reason, and what is their race, and so on and so forth? Is it disproportionate for a certain number? Absolutely. And I think that's key to the conversation, and that's our goal, to get you that information so you can analyze it.
Great, thank you. G-Day, then Michael Rubin.
Yeah, I wanted to find out if it was possible to get data by ward, income, and hours use for the childcare, and then also if it was possible to get data on internet usage by ward and income. I don't know if that one's is easily accessible.
We can certainly provide information from our recreation department about their childcare and where the people live that take advantage of that. For internet use, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe I can follow up with you, and maybe we can find some proxy to that information.
Okay.
Michael?
Yeah, it's really more of a placeholder. It's for Susie, I think. It's the issue of the double taxation that we get with the county and Takoma Park for all of those departments that we heard from tonight, and whether we're getting adequate rebates from the county, which I believe we're not, and I believe the city of Takoma Park believes that we're not, and just where that all plays in, because I think it's it's not an easy thing to figure out because especially during COVID, I mean, Takoma Park residents were available. I mean, they were able to get like county grants for business and for individuals and for crisis. And then we had our own set of grants. So how you figure this stuff out is challenging, but I know it's relevant to the budget issue and it may ultimately give us more resources to recommend use of. So that's it.
I appreciate the question. It's a huge issue and it's particularly helpful when we're talking public safety. The quick description is that property owners in Takoma Park pay property taxes to Takoma Park and they pay property taxes to Montgomery County. And some of the money that is sent to Montgomery County is for services you don't receive. The police department of Montgomery County does not come into Takoma Park in any way. We have our own police department. We only deal with them as we would deal with DC or others, just on a cooperative way. We maintain our roads, but you're paying the county for road maintenance. So there's things, so road maintenance and police are the two really big topics, budget items. There's also an amount for crossing guards and for parks. Then there's fun discussions about recreation, which are way too complex to get into in this thing. The big topic is police service, because the amount that we receive from Montgomery County, they're supposed to pay us what they would have spent on police service in Takoma Park if it had been unincorporated. And the amount that they are paying is based on the system that they used in the year 2000. And it hasn't been increased since 2012. And just imagine everything that you do and the cost of staff every year goes up. What that means is that we have been accommodating the costs of policing more and more every year since 2000, and then since 2012, even more so. The comparison, so there needs to be negotiations with Montgomery County about how do you come up with the formula for police services, because that is a big ticket item. We get about $2,800,000 a year for police services from Montgomery County, but that's not at all what we end up paying for policing. And this is based on what Montgomery County, they used to not have as many staff in the Silver Spring area, for example. Once Silver Spring started building up or whatever, they increased the number of officers that served by a ton. They do community outreach and policing. They don't pay us anything about that. If we are able to get fair payment back from Montgomery County, we are able then to use those funds for any reason we want in Takoma Park. It doesn't have to go to the police department, it goes into our general fund. It allows us flexibility to provide the kind of outreach and care that we talk about dealing with mental health or dealing with traffic improvements or all these other things. So yes, I'm happy to, there's a whole thing on the website about municipal tax duplication. There's efforts to tell the county about it right now. The mayor's written a blog that's posted. So offline, and I've been living with this since 1998. So I'm the actual expert in Montgomery County now. Nobody else is left that knows that I know it. So anybody who wants to talk to me about it, I can give you the background.
Great. And Adam has the last question here in the chat box. What information can we get within the confines of Leo BR about complaints against Takoma Park officers?
I mean, that's going to be a much longer conversation, but it's very limited in scope right now. If you look at our internal affairs report that I shared, that will basically have the gist of what we can put out currently. It is very limited and does not lend to transparency.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to transition over to my colleague, Jevin, now to talk a little bit about subcommittees as we close out this meeting. Thank you all.
All right, y'all. So I have 60 seconds and I want to do this in a way that respects all of your time. So y'all ready for this? Deep breath in, deep breath out. Let's do this. Okay, so I'm giving you a bit of homework. I want you over the next few days to think about the subcommittee structure. There are many different models that can work. And we're happy to share best practices from all that, from various different groups that we've led and studies that we've seen. But ultimately, this is your group and it needs to feel right to each and every one of you. The main idea here is that we have smaller groups that can really dig into the level of detail that would be needed to get the recommendations. We have the next 13 meetings to do so. Next meeting, what we will do is use a great portion of that meeting to have a discussion around how we want to formulate our subcommittees. Our commitment here is that we'll facilitate in such a way that the groups will not work in silos and that they'll have full awareness of what is being discussed in other groups. In other processes we found it most useful to form subgroups based on themes so that you can dig into the issues that you're most interested and passionate in. So grab a pen and pad. Here are the guiding questions I want you to think about. So when we set up for our next committee meeting, we can have a discussion around this. Question number 1 is based on the discussions that we've had thus far between last meeting and this meeting, and after hearing from some of the city officials, what are some of the themes that you've heard? What are the key things that we keep coming back to that you keep thinking about? The next question is, what are some of the subcategories in which you want this group to focus on? That can be as broad or as defined as you would like. We'll have a greater discussion around it. Last question. Are there key words that come to mind when you think of reimagining public safety? For example, mental health and wellness, social services, recruitment, etc. So use that as the framing questions. And what we'll do is we'll come back to that when it's time at our next meeting, and we'll have a broader discussion around what our subcommittee structures will look like. From there, we'll aggregate all the feedback on subcommittees, and then we'll use that to share and create the subcommittee structure. And like I said, that'll be done so in the next meeting. Now, looking forward, we have our next meeting. It would be on March 30th. Oh, yep. Dwayne, I can repeat the second question for you. What are the subcommittees in which you want our group to focus on? Michael Aiken's going to drop it into the chat for you, so you have that. So as we're looking forward, our next meeting will be on March 30th. We've received feedback that a couple of task force members have standing commitments on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. So what we're going to do is we're proposing that we start the next meeting at 5:30 p.m. and we'll run to 7:30 p.m. So it'll be a 90-minute meeting that'll run from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And we'll do that like that going forward. If you have any issues with that or any conflict with the 5:30 Tuesday time, or if that presents any challenges, please email us, let us know, and we'll use that to help guide us moving forward. In our next meeting, just once more, I want you to do your homework. You have an assignment from us. Come prepared to discuss, and we're going to use that to drive the conversation. And as always, I'm only a few minutes over, and so I'm going to give you your time back. But as always, thank you for your time today. We truly appreciate your willingness and your commitment to having these tough conversations. We're excited for where we're heading, and we're grateful for your participation. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, any thoughts, please give us an email. Michael Aiken will drop our emails into the chat. Jamal Holtz, myself, his, Molly's, and Cordell's. Use them liberally, and send us a line if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything you think that we should discuss on. Thank you all so very much for your time tonight. We look forward to our next conversation. Mark your calendar, March 30th, 5:30 p.m. And we will be excited. You'll receive an email with the agenda ahead of time. Have a great one, everyone.